is email? What does it mean?
Communication is the imparting or exchanging of information or
The
news.
single biggest problem in communication is the illusion that it has taken place.
Conversation is the oral exchange of sentiments, observations, opinions, or ideas.
Forbes Books Radio presents The Conversation with Clinton M. Padgett.
Joining me today on The Conversation is Rob Mortensen. Rob is the General Manager for Delivery Systems and Services for North America and Europe at EMD Electronics, a company that provides a broad range of high-tech products and solutions for the semiconductor industry. Rob has over 25 years of experience in the sector, including 7 years at Intel. He holds an undergraduate degree in chemistry from the University of Colorado and an MBA from the University of New Mexico's Anderson School of Management. Rob, thanks for joining me on The Conversation today.
Thanks for having me, Clint. I'm really happy to be here.
So I like to think of all the people that come on the show as kind of superheroes in their own regard. And so every superhero has kind of a backstory. And I'm just curious, can you give me some kind of what your backstory is? What got you to where you are today?
Yeah, it's been, you say 25 years, and I often say I've been in the semiconductor industry for 29 years and holding. So it's been a long time, and it's a long journey. But my first job out of my undergraduate, I worked at Coors Brewing Company for about 3.5 years before I got into the semiconductor industry. And we had beer on tap in the lunchroom. And, there's some days where I'm like, why did I ever leave? But
I was thinking, what a great job to graduate college and move to. That's awesome.
But, I was looking for something for sure that was more challenging with more growth expectations. And so I went to work at Ashland Chemical, moved to Dallas, and managed the lab there. And that business kind of grew, and my roles grew within the business, and just kind of moved around with Ashland, moved up into managing a number of labs. After that, left Ashland, went to work for Intel, where I also managed labs, physical analysis, like FA, kind of failure analysis, and we did electrical fault isolation. And then I ended up in a commercial role there where I owned a commodity. And then from there, I moved over to what our business is, our slurry business now. And that's when I moved back to Albuquerque and ran the factory there. Kind of did a number of jobs there, had a commercial role, and then managed the engineering team, and then ended up managing the factory. And then through a number of acquisitions, we ended up with EMD Electronics, and we moved that manufacturing offshore to Taiwan. And I moved to Austin, where I am now, and took on a role within our services organization, managing a team of a couple hundred people. And then that grew into a more global role. And from there, I ended up in my current role as a general manager for DS&S. So it's been a fun and challenging journey for sure.
It sounds like it. Now talk about what does EMD do, and what is the group that you're in charge of? How does that all fit in?
Yeah, so EMD is, in the US and Canada, we're known as EMD Electronics. The company, really the parent company, is Merck KGaA, Darmstadt, Germany. So it's the German Merck. And in the US and Canada, we're known as EMD. So DS&S is the equipment arm of our semiconductor solutions business. So we build gas, chemical, and slurry equipment that safely delivers these materials to the factory for our semiconductor customers. So we have the equipment business. Then we also have a services arm where we have over 65% of our employees are there in the field every day. And they sit at a customer site, they maintain equipment, they deliver materials, they solve problems locally with the customers. And then we also do some turnkey management where we do construction management that's built around our technology and our process. And we build big projects for factories that are being built within the semiconductor industry. So it's a great, really challenging business to be in. And for anybody who's been watching the semiconductor industry, you know that we're growing aggressively. So we've been kind of in sprint mode for the last few years for sure. It's been a lot of fun.
So the materials that you guys develop or deliver to the factories, these are like fabrication factories where they actually make the chips,
Yes, where they're
the
making
wafers.
wafers. Uh-huh.
Yep.
So, we have customers all over the world. My region that I manage is in the U.S. and Europe. But if you think about the largest semiconductor customers in the world, those are all our customers. We have equipment in the sub fab at every single one of them. So it's an exciting place to be because I feel like we really have a hand in their success, and their success really does a lot of really good things for all of us, in terms of technology.
And I think they call those foundries. Is that true?
Yeah. So foundries are the customers that have high volume manufacturing, but they build product for other companies. So
Okay.
there are plenty of semiconductor companies that just do design, and then they go to a foundry to build those wafers. And then we also have customers who build their own internal technology, and that's a little bit different than a foundry. But some of our customers actually do both, and both businesses are a little bit different. Our customers who are building their own are more standard, and they do long runs, of a very consistent and reliable capacity. And then the foundries are more a little bit up and down, changing processes, and so our work there also needs to be a little more flexible, kind of more agile.
Sure. I mean, I've worked in the past at a couple of semiconductor companies doing project work for Maxim Integrated, which is now ADI, and Marvell. So I'm familiar with the terminology of foundries and getting the wafers done and, all that stuff. So it's interesting.
It is. It's a great business. It's, like I said, 29 years. It's changed a lot in a lot of ways, and it's pretty incredible how our customers, they make small innovations over time, but over that period of time, we're billions and billions of transistors now on a chip, where we started that long ago with a few thousand. So it's made it, that technology's made a huge difference.
Yeah, I graduated in 1995 from Georgia Tech with an electrical engineering degree, and I can tell you it has changed a lot since I graduated.
Right. That's the thing that keeps me coming back every day, is that those little changes make big changes to our process, the way we build and develop equipment, the way we interact with our customers. And so I honestly never get up and say like, oh, this is just a job. Every day it's got a lot of really good challenges. At the end of the day, I'm pretty worn out.
I'm sure you are. Now, in 2021, EMD Electronics made a significant investment in growing the business here in the U.S. I think I read about $1 billion. Can you talk a little bit about what that's meant for your company and your job, and then maybe share some lessons you've learned to help other leaders navigate through these major growth periods?
Yeah, for sure. The amount is actually $3 billion.
Wow, $3 billion
worldwide, and it's a program we call Level Up, and what it is intended to do is to match our customers' aggressive growth strategy. So for us in DS&S, we're really focused on, we're solely focused on the semiconductor industry, and you've seen all of our customers expand. So Samsung's building in Austin, TSMC is building in Arizona, Intel's building globally, Micron's building more in Boise, and all of these companies are investing aggressively and really requiring more and more of us in terms of services and equipment and turnkey business. So we recognize that, and we're not the only business within EMD. Our materials businesses recognize that, and so within EMD, we've had a very accepting management team of that growth, and they've been able to invest ahead of the growth, which has allowed us to then be prepared for all the growth we're seeing in our industry. And it's not slowing down. So within DS&S, what it's meant for us, a lot of different things, but the two most significant things that we see every day right now are 2 new factories. So we had 3 factories prior to the Level Up program, and Now we have a new factory in Kaohsiung, Taiwan, and we have a new factory in Arizona. So now we have a 5-factory system to support all of our customers. And so what that means to us every day is new complexity to the work, but more capacity. It gives us an opportunity to kind of remake our S&OP process to make sure we balance our capacities across all of our factories so we can get our customers what they need when they need it.
Any lessons learned in that process of adding the 2 factories and all the growth you've gone through?
Oh yeah, so many. I would say off the bat that communication, you're going to hear this a lot, and I know you talk a lot about it too, as you know, when I looked at your material, and that is that communication and transparency across the organization on the intent and the context of the work we're doing is so, so important to keep everyone aligned and to keep everybody following the single path. So that's one thing that, you can apply that lesson, I think, to anything, but in periods of really high amounts of growth where we're sprinting, it's so, so important to stop, take time to communicate effectively to make sure everybody understands why we're working so hard to meet the customer need. The second thing, no surprise here, is that, it's not just us, it's everybody, like our customers who are growing right now. When we started this growth, we're in the middle of the pandemic, and there was a lot of supply chain upset, a lot of chaos within the supply chain because of all of this growth. And so, the lessons we learned about building factories, signaling to our suppliers what we're going to need and how much growth is going to be there is so important to start early and to be as transparent as possible with everyone along the food chain so they can be prepared, so we can be prepared, and our customers can be prepared. Because if we were to go out and build a new factory and not signal to our suppliers and then try to turn on all these, new orders, we would have people standing in our factories doing nothing, just waiting on parts. So we have become much, much more collaborative across the entire business cycle because of the supply chain upsets, and building 2 new factories during that period has made it even more apparent that communication and that early signal is super, super important.
Yeah, it just makes sense that you would need to tell your suppliers, and yet I've seen this happen before where it's a last second, oh, we forgot to mention this to them, and now you can't get what you need in the front door so you can put something out the back door. So
yeah, and we're starting to see some areas smooth out a little bit, but there are still some areas like in electronics where it's still difficult. The supply chain is still a little unreliable, and so we're still going through that, and we're still working on ways to try to understand the chaos a little bit more and control what we can control, so we load our factories in a consistent manner. Not an easy thing to do when supplies don't show up on time, or they unexpectedly don't show up on time.
Yeah, we could probably talk about customs being another challenge, I'm sure. So in an article on LinkedIn from a couple years ago, you wrote, quote, "Quality is not the exclusive responsibility of a particular function, facility, or organization. Our profound quality culture is a foundation for our success. Quality is embedded in everything we do," end quote. So what do you do to promote that culture of quality at EMD Electronics, and how do you maintain it across the global workforce?
Yeah, I'm glad you read that quote. It's super important to our business. And I would add in there that our number one priority for our teams, of course, is safety, because we have people in the field working around hazardous material and hazardous energy. But safety and quality really walk hand in hand together. And so everything I'm going to say about quality applies to safety too. And that is, the entire team from beginning to end has to understand that culture and what our customer really wants. So it starts at the beginning with our commercial teams and our sales engineers interacting with the customer to understand exactly what it is that they need. They hand off to the engineering team, and the engineering team has quality built into their system. So when they're designing packages for manufacturing or designing new products, that they have safety and quality in mind in that design. And then we don't just hand it off to the factory and let it build it and then test it afterwards, right? We have people in the factory, and we have test attributes that we're testing along the way to ensure that each point in the process yields a quality product. And in the end, our customers, of course, require a certification of the materials and the products. And so we've built quality in there. I would say the most important part of that is the culture around everybody understanding the why our customers are so demanding when it comes to quality, when it comes to safety. It's because any kind of outage at their factory is millions and millions of dollars. And so they can't afford that. They need materials. They need equipment that's reliable. They need really high levels of quality within their equipment and services to ensure that their process is reliable. So we have to do the exact same thing. We have to invest to make sure that we model quality and safety in every part of our process, and everybody understands why. And once they understand the why, then it's much, much easier to get them to buy in and do the work in a quality way.
That's the second time I've heard that recently, and the why is so important. It's not just telling somebody what to do, it's having them understand why we're doing it. So not only can they be more engaged, but they might even be able to improve the process, because if they know why we're trying to do what we're doing.
In fact, they do all the time. It's great to have people who are so engaged in their work and understand the context of their work, and they're willing to raise their hand and say, here's where we could do better, or here's a problem, here's how we can fix it. And we really live by that kind of feedback from all of our teams. So it helps us, just like our customers, it helps us make small iterative changes to our process that in the end makes our business more reliable, because we're more reliably supplying the customer.
Makes sense. Now, you manage teams across the globe, and what have you found to be the key to communicating with people in different locations who might have different customs, varied ways of working? And certainly I've run into it in some places like, say, Japan, where a word means something completely different than what you're expecting it to mean, or when they're talking to you and they're nodding their head saying something like hi, 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 thinking that means okay, and it doesn't. What are the challenges there, and how do you ensure that your message comes across in the way you intended it?
So first of all, I'm going to sound a little bit like a repeat record here, but I think it really starts with understanding and modeling culture. So we have, within EMD, when we talk about culture, we talk about some specific behaviors that we embody and that we want all of our teams to embody. And so when we can get our leaders aligned to that cultural norm, where we speak the same language, the same business language, we elicit the same behaviors, then that really spreads kind of organically throughout the organization. Now, certainly, how we communicate like you said, in Japan, and how we gain consensus in Japan is very different than how we would do it in the US. But we have local managers managing in that area. We have people who really understand and are local to the culture, so that's in their DNA. And so for me, what I rely on is their expertise and their guidance when it comes to communication. One of the things that I would say I've learned over my career that's been a big learning, but also a big frustration. So we talked a little bit about my career and kind of how I got to where I am now, but when I managed a factory, you could stand in front of everybody at one time, and you could model the behavior, you could model the culture, you could give the data, you could look at the KPIs, and that was fantastic. And then I left the factory and went to a 24/7 operation with multiple different groups working over multiple different shifts, and you never get the chance to get in front of everybody at the same time. So when that happens, it's so critical to have your leadership team who understands and models the culture, and they use the same language, because when our teams hear us say the same thing over and over in the same way, it really becomes ingrained in their habits, which over time becomes part of their culture too. So that, I mean, having a really strong signal on culture and modeling on culture is super, super important. And then the other thing that has been, I would say, a luxury for all of us is, we learned during the pandemic that there's other ways to communicate other than me flying somewhere and looking somebody in the eye. And so what we're doing today using technology has been really, really helpful for me within my region. I put out a video blog just about every week, and it's just kind of a short update on different parts of the business or highlighting some of our teams. And that's a great, great way to share information across many teams at one time, and a great way to model culture as well. But I'm also, one more thing is, a huge fan of face-to-face. So I really missed during the pandemic, I really missed getting out and working with our teams and being in front of our teams. Technology is great and video is great, but really in the end, there's really no alternative, no good alternative to looking each other in the eye and having really good conversations.
No, I understand. I'm 100% agree with you on that. So communication, of course, when I looked up in the definition, it's basically, I can tell you something that can be communicating. It's done through emails, through text messages, through Slack, Jira post, whatever.
Yeah.
And even your video blog is, of course, a communication. But to your point, the reason I love face-to-face as well is conversation is so critical to making sure that your message is received in the exact way that you meant. Because when you have a conversation, you have clarifying questions that are able to be asked, right, so that you get the message right across. And I think to your point, during the pandemic, we switched over to the one-way kind of communication. And I would like to see some of that dialogue come back where it's face-to-face, and not the only way to communicate, but boy, it sure is a great way to communicate.
Yeah, I agree. And I mean, we're not the only company who's kind of worked through this arc of, we all went home. We're all, dialed into every meeting from our guest room. And, we understood why I wasn't a big fan of it, but of course we all did it for the health of each other and the health of our business. And now we're more in a hybrid work environment. And I tend to be on the come to the office side of the hybrid. Like, I'm here as much as possible when I'm in town. When I'm traveling, I'm at our other offices. But we try to get our employees in at least 3 days a week into the office, because in every part of our business, it's so important to be able to collaborate. And I think we saw a lot of areas in terms of productivity increase when people went home. But what we saw was a slowdown kind of innovation and of brainstorming new ideas. And so we ended up just kind of working in the way we were always working. We were just doing it virtually. And getting back together has given us the opportunity to maybe slow down a little bit, meet each other around the water cooler, not only just talk about the weekend, but talk about the work that we're doing. And that, although it feels like it's not as productive, in the end, it's much more innovative. It's much more engaging. Our employees, I think, feel much more connected to the business, which is a super important part of having a workforce that's loyal to the company and also services the customer in the right way.
I think you mentioned culture quite a few times so far, and I would think it would be challenging if I was a new hire that came on during the pandemic and I was 100% remote and virtual. Because culture to me, it maybe means something different to you, but to me, culture is what happens when the phone is hung up. How do people react? And how do people talk to each other in the office setting? And you don't really get that through Zoom. You don't get that. I don't think you can learn culture that way. So I'm curious, did you see that? Was it more difficult to push across a culture that you seem to lean on quite a bit during a virtual session like that?
Absolutely. It was so difficult. So, we have, even during the pandemic, we had a lot of essential workers. Like I said, we have a lot of field work, and those employees and the employees at the factory are essential workers. They have to be in the factory every day. So for them, it was much more easy to interact and to have our leaders model the culture. But that you mentioned the investment earlier, and we were talking about all these capital expenditures that we're doing as a level up program, but that also include a lot of new people. And those people were hired, and they didn't meet their teams face to face for a long time. And that, I agree, was a really big hurdle to get over. With EMD, we not only did we attempt, and we're not perfect in every case, but not only did we attempt to engage them often, even if it was virtual, but we would set up small cohorts of people and have even external consultants work with them to talk through what it is to work remotely, how to connect better, and try to get everybody feeling like they're having an impact even though they're so far away, and that they're members of the team. And I still think it's a really hard thing to do if you're just doing it virtually.
Yeah, I see that as a huge challenge. And I know that some people they want to be 100% remote, and I get it. It's just, I don't know how you run a business, to your point, where there's culture involved, and you have some people that have to come in. They probably are a little bit jealous of the fact that other people get to work from home.
I'm exactly the opposite. I was like, at the time when it first started, I was on site at our customer, and I was so glad, that I would get to go in. And then my role expanded where I was managing the larger services team, and then I went home, and I didn't like that much. So I was lucky to have the connection here in Austin with the customer where I could still get on site, so I could get out of the house every now and then. But I'm glad we're back in the office.
Yeah, I'm a big face-to-face guy myself, so I value the interactions and the dialogues that happen in the hallway and over coffee just as much as anything else. So managing supply chains means managing a lot of different people and a lot of moving parts across multiple states and countries. So what have you learned across your career that helps you balance the needs of the various groups and keeps everybody pointing towards the same goal?
I'm going to have a similar answer again. That one of the things, if we ever get the chance to work more together, you'll see that I really try to focus on a few main things. I think if we can keep our message simple and work on a few main priorities, then we're much more likely to be successful. So when we talk about supply chain and when we talk about how we manage communications across big groups, I'm going to return to being very transparent and very timely in communication, setting up expectations across the entire business and making sure everybody understands and is communicating those with each other. The supply chain upset has taught us all, not just EMD, but all of us, new ways of communicating. And what we have done is we have really morphed into a much more collaborative business with our suppliers and our customers. And our lead times, like everybody else, have grown. And our suppliers' lead times for critical parts have grown. And if we don't raise the flag early and say, hey, there's a large slug of business coming your way and we're going to rely on parts A, B, and C, if we don't say that, then they're not going to be prepared. If they don't tell us they have shortages early, it doesn't give us the opportunity to be creative in ways to solve those problems, to find alternate parts or to find alternate engineering solutions to those problems. So it requires all of us to communicate early and often to ensure that we have the same expectation and we know what's coming at us. Even if it's bad news, we need to know early. And our customers are exactly the same way. None of us like to be surprised, and them at the end of the food chain also hate to be surprised. So it's not always easy to give messages around we're going to miss or it's going to be late or things like that. But in the end, we all appreciate it more when we know the full picture, and we are not surprised by those things.
Yeah, that's something that I talk about a lot as well. And that if you're going to disappoint your customer because you're going to be late, it's better to tell them early. Yeah. Because they're going to be disappointed either way. But at least if you tell them early what you can do and you tell them up front, hey, we're going to be a month late and deliver 1 month late, then you're going to have a happier disappointed customer than if you get a month away and go, okay, now we're going to be a month late.
Yeah.
Better to get the bad news out early.
And the great thing about our customers is, they have a lot on the line too. So they've become very collaborative and they help a lot. There are times where we've seen shortages on printed circuit boards, and it might be just one component, but it could be a component from our customer, So we turn to them and they help us by setting us up with their supply chain. And in some cases, it's really, really saved us a lot of time by understanding the full supply chain and then kind of reaching into that supply chain where we have a lever we can pull and getting help. And you can't do that if you don't have a good trusting relationship and open conversation with your customers.
And by the way, you've mentioned a couple times now you're going to come back to the same responses, but from what I've gathered from talking to people, workers really appreciate consistency in the approach of their leaders. And so it sounds like you're really consistent in what you do, which I think is probably received very well.
Well, it helps
on your
me
team.
too. To have kind of a few things that really guide me is really easy, or much easier than trying to think of a lot of things at once.
Well, that concludes part one of my conversation with Rob Mortensen, General Manager of Delivery Systems and Services for North America and Europe at EMD Electronics. Coming up in part two, Rob discusses techniques for improving communication tactics as a leader.
If you're working on ways to become more social and more confident in your communication, and you don't feel like you're there now, one strategy, which sounds crazy, is to fake it for a little while, to perform for a little while. And then you start to realize that your performance becomes a little bit more of a habit and becomes more of your style, and you can become much more confident in the way you do things.
Thanks for listening to The Conversation. To find out more about Clint, go to clintonmpaget.com and pick up Clint's book, How Teams Triumph, Managing by Commitment, at Amazon. The Conversation with Clinton M. Paget is a production of Forbes Books.